Okay, so welcome. We are very glad that you could join us today. My name is Herman Kwoba. I work for GIZ, and looking forward to a very engaging session today. I'm very glad and very happy that you've taken the time to be with us today in this meeting. And so far in Kenya, I know the developments as far as electric mobility is concerned, it's very modest, but we are gradually making progress. And the idea for this meeting today was so that we could all see that at least something is going on, and we are happy that you actually made the time to be with us. Sorry about that. I just opened the correct presentation. Here we go. Okay, so now quick overview of the agenda for the meeting today. I will do a very quick scene setting, and then after that, we have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Martin Eshiwani today from the government of Kenya, and then David Rubia from the United Nations Environment Program. And then finally, we dive deep into a detailed question and answer session. And also, as far as the question and answer session is concerned, we are also very much interested in getting insights in terms of activities you're doing, no matter the scale. We will be very much interested to get some of this in the question and answer session as well. And overview of the session. So this is how it is. This is how the whole arrangement is. The control panel for the webinar, the platform that we're using today. So if you see there is number 1, that's where you feel free to hide the panel. Also, in case you want to see everything on full screen, you can just click on the button labeled number 2. And then in case you want to change your language, click on number 3. And then this is very, very important. Where it's labeled number 4, this is where we will be getting questions and answer or responses on issues that you think needs to be highlighted in the webinar today. Also, just to mention that we will be recording the session, and everyone joining us today is muted. A little bit about myself. My name is Herman Kwoba. As I mentioned, I work for GIZ on a project called Advancing Transport and Climate Strategies. And it's a global project. In Kenya, our key partner is Motihood, the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development. And the project is running until 2021. So key activities in Kenya that we carry out are primarily informed by the National Climate Change Action Plan and the Kenya Climate Change Act of 2016. This is what informs what the project does. And key areas of work include data, institutional enhancement, and capacity development largely. So to the main topic of the day, why electric mobility? And the reason we thought we could highlight what's happening on electric mobility, the main angle also is the fact that electric mobility has been identified as a key mitigation action for the transport sector in the National Climate Change Action Plan. And when we did our analysis based on data based on the current situation in Kenya and doing a few projections, we realized electric mobility is one of the actions that has the second highest mitigation potential in the transport sector. Also, the fact that Kenya's electricity has a very high share of renewable energy makes the case for electric mobility to be more attractive for the country. And the fact that for electric mobility to be more attractive and as well have higher emission saving, the main thing is that you need to have a higher renewable energy share in your electricity mix. And you can see in the graph over here where there is the highest saving, it's mostly with passenger cars, but also public transport as well contributes significantly. So, I mean, why electric mobility? Why not other technologies like the fuel cell or the issues around PTX? One thing is that looking at our current condition, there's a lot of application for other technologies like say hydrogen, but looking at our current condition in Kenya, as far as application of electric mobility, application of fuel cell or any other comparative technology like battery electric vehicle and the likes, in transport, the highest efficiency in application in transport is primarily you get the best efficiency from battery electric vehicles. There's a little bit of conversion loss as far as fuel cell is concerned, or PTX, as you can see in this representation. So this is primarily why this sort of technologies, why we think this discussion is quite important today. Moving forward as well, as far as today's discussion is concerned, we will have, it's part of a series of events. It's not just one event. And today's event is, as mentioned, we are glad to be have the State Department of the government of Kenya on board, and also the United Nations Environment Program making some insights primarily on what they're doing in Kenya. Also, the other thing is that we have another event coming up, 2 more to be specific, and the second one is going to be on rural and urban applications of electric mobility. And here we're glad to have Siemens Shipton as well as Wetu, who are doing a lot of work around rural applications of electric mobility. So work around proof of concepts and trying to see what specific applications work best in rural areas. We also have Night Energy, who have been, I would say, one of the pioneers of electric mobility in Kenya, and they will be sharing with us primarily around urban applications of electric mobility. So the event is going to happen on the 27th of August. And then the third event on the 17th of September, this one also quite exciting. We have a focus on public transport. How can you apply this sort of technology and in a transitioning of the public transport in Kenya? And here we'll have Opibus, who've been doing quite great work around retrofitting of existing vehicle fleets and seeing how this can be applied in mobility in the country. Also, we have some insights from the Association of Energy Professionals of East Africa, and primarily their focus will be on the energy situation in Kenya, and also giving us insights from the energy supply perspective. As well, also, as I mentioned, the whole event's timing is 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. On each respective date. And now to introduce our speakers. So we have Mr. Eshiwani, as I mentioned, and from the government of Kenya. As well, we will have David Rubia, also giving us insights as well on electric mobility in Kenya. So to begin with, I would like to invite Mr. Eshiwani, who is also already on the call, to switch on his camera, and we'll start off with a presentation. A brief introduction of Mr. Eshiwani. He is the director of Road and Rail at the State Department of Transport, but currently deployed to the Nairobi Metropolitan Services, and he's been a key mover of electric mobility in Kenya. Particularly, he's been involved in the development of the electric mobility standards in Kenya, as well as he's also a representative of the transport sector in the National Climate Change Action Plan development process. So, Mr. Eshiwani, please.
So, Herman, Mr. Eshiwani is experiencing some technical difficulties. I don't know if he has been able to rejoin.
Okay.
I'm back. Are you getting me?
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
Mr. Eshiwani, good to have you.
Are you getting me?
Yes, we are. If you can switch on your mic as well. Your video will be nice. Not possible, still okay.
As Herman has said, I am Martin Eshiwani from NMS and formerly at the State Department of Transport. So I have a brief presentation on status of electric mobility in Kenya. What is important, or what I want to start by saying, is that can you please go to the next slide, Herman? The government of Kenya has identified electrification as a priority mitigation action in the National Climate Change Action Plan 2018-2022. It is proposed as a key transformative action also in the Integrated National Transport Policy that is currently under review. Next. Herman, are you experiencing challenges? Then secondly, secondly, I wanted to share about motorization level in Kenya. These are figures of about mid-2019, which indicates that as a country we have about 4.3 million vehicles or motorized mode of transport, whereby motorcycles constitute about 1.1 million units, motor vehicles 1.7, then three-wheelers about 400,000. Then another point which is important to note is that on average we register between 90,000 to 100,000 units per year. Then you find that out of this that is brought in the country, close to 55% remain in and around Nairobi. The rest of that goes to other parts of the country. Also, with regard to motorcycles, we have about, it ranges from 100 and sometimes goes up to 140,000 units registered per year. So that is the rate at which we are getting new units every year in the country. And this means that in terms of emissions, it is significant. Next. This figure shows the trend, and you will note that from around 2007 there, the number of units, particularly motorcycles, rose sharply. This was due to policy changes that made importation of motorcycles with the engine capacity of 250 cc cheaper. So the rate at which they were acquired increased substantially. And the aim then was that can they increase mobility, particularly in areas that are not properly served? So when we look at it at the moment, the way motorcycles are being used, it has become a major mode of transport in the rural areas and parts of urban areas. So they are more convenient in the sense that they access some of those areas that cannot easily be served by a normal public transport service. But when you come to our own policy, we view them as still critical for provision of last and first mile of a person's journey, in the sense that they are supposed to link people from where they stay to where they can connect to other modes of transport. Next. Now, when we talk about e-mobility, of course, a question which may arise is, we have the capacity, but when we assess what is produced locally and what is consumed, then we realize that Kenya has an installed capacity of about 2,800 megawatts. And when the demand is at the peak, then 1,900 megawatts are utilized. This means that we have surplus energy that can be used for charging EVs if we introduce them. Another point which is important to note as far as climate change is concerned is that over 80% of energy, electricity generated in Kenya is by renewable energy. So you can see there the dominant area where we get our power is actually geothermal. We also have hydro, wind, as you can see in the figure. Next. Next, Herman.
Sorry, yes, I've moved. There's a bit of delay, but it should be changing. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, then briefly, I would like to highlight some of the efforts we have done to promote electric mobility in the country, or what we are doing. First, I would like to say that the Ministry of Transport, together the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and with the support of GIZ and UN Environment, we were able to develop Kenyan standards for EVs. And we now have standards in place. Secondly, the Kenya government, through Finance Act 2019, that's the budget speech which was read for financial year 2018-2020, the government reduced exercise duty for electric vehicles from 20% to 10%. So we expect this to at least improve the pricing when they are finally reach the consumers. Secondly, we are also focusing on policies and mechanisms that can ensure majority of new units are electric. We have also worked on a national policy to guide the use of 2- and 3-wheelers. This was mainly with the support of UN Environment and GIZ, and I hope maybe David will speak to it. So as we speak now, we continue working towards that improvement of EVs. But that requires partnership of various stakeholders, and we are ready to partner with them, development partners, stakeholders to see what we can do. There is a pilot that we had planned, which together with the county government of Kisumu, Kenya Power, and UN Environment. So basically, those are the issues, key issues, but there are a number of areas. There are a number of areas that we are still working on. For example, we are looking at how do we improve financial access and develop new business models to overcome high initial costs of EVs. Improve policy environment through incentives and facilitation of investment on charging infrastructure throughout the country. Enhance public awareness. This is very critical because every time we have a session discussing with key stakeholders about this, promoting the use of EVs, a number of questions arise. Then area of building the capacity of the local human and institutional, technical, mechanical, and electrical expertise. Then explore possibility of local assembly of EVs or their components. These are some of the areas we are considering because we know there are very many issues to address. Another further to that is that we want to engage stakeholders. For example, NTSA on issues related to registration of electric motor vehicles so that they are properly captured in a way that will be easy to access clear information and they have reasonable information about EVs. Then in addition to that, sensitization of clearing agents in partnership with the KRA so that they are also in a clear picture and have a good understanding of what needs to be done at what stage while performing their duties. Then development of user guide for electric vehicle standards. That one is in place. I didn't hear part of what Herman was saying, but I believe he shared that particular aspect. Then mobilization for electrification of public service, public bus fleet, e.g. BRT. Kenya is in the process of introducing BRT. Our contract was just signed to start construction of the first line, which is called line 2 from Nairobi city towards along Thika Road, Kenyatta National Hospital, Kasarani to Ruiru side. Then electrification of standard gauge rail, that's a long-term plan, which will be considered, but it's something that we have already captured in our national climate change 2018-2022. So we have captured that as our priority. So basically, that is it in summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eshiwani, and for the insights. I know there's quite a lot of questions coming in the chat box. We will attend to them shortly, ladies and gentlemen. So in the meantime, I would also like to invite Mr. David Rubia from the United Nations Environment Program. So David is working on an electric mobility global project. So we're looking forward to getting insights from David around it, around electric mobility. Also, maybe some focus on 2- and 3-wheelers, and highlighted by Mr. Eshiwani is one of the key highly increasing vehicle category numbers in the country. So David currently works for the UN Environment Air Quality and Mobility Unit. So David, karibu.
Asante sana, Herman. Thank you very much. Very excited to be here. Very big honor to speak after Martin, who is as you said, is essentially the heartbeat from government on electric mobility in Kenya and a big champion. So this is a big honor. As you mentioned, to work for the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, the Air Quality Mobility Unit, which will soon be the Sustainable Mobility Unit, and we support countries to implement sustainable transport policies. So I'm just, whenever we talk about electric mobility, and by the way, this is the first talk I've given about electric mobility in Kenya, so I'm excited about that, because usually we're talking about electric mobility globally, but being Kenyan and being at home, this is exciting. I like to give a bit of a context to why it's important, because I'm as guilty as a lot of people are of having questioned at some point, why do we even care about electric mobility here? We're talking about roads with potholes and no public transport. Is this even an issue for us? Is this an issue more for developed countries? So I like to start off by pointing out that we have, so our mobility model is a bit of a skewed one. Most of the cars that are on our roads are imports. And if you look at this slide here, it shows the 30 top motor vehicle producing countries. Kenya is not one of them. Just for comparison's sake, South Africa, which is number 22, produces about 600,000 vehicles. Can you hear me? Sorry, I think that's Martin, not on mute. South Africa produces about 600,000 vehicles, and Kenya is producing about 10,000. And the difference that shows you is that Kenya's motor vehicle assemblies industry supports about 12,000 jobs. It's not at full capacity. At full capacity, we'd be looking at about 80,000 jobs, while South Africa's creates about 500,000, if you will, jobs. And so that just shows you the disparity in terms of lack of jobs we don't have from local manufacturing. But at the same time, we do have a bit of an industry from used vehicle sales, but it's not as big as this. Next, please. So the next thing that I like to point out is, so we're importing all these vehicles used, we're not manufacturing them here. And then we turn around and we buy all the fuel that they run on. And just for comparison's sake here, I wanted to show the petrol import bill for Kenya for 2019 was 295 billion. And for comparison's sake, you can see that was about equivalent to the total county allocation for 2016-2017. And I know that right now there's a bit of an impasse on how to allocate money to counties, but we can see here we're spending more money or about the same money on fuel to run vehicles. And another thing I like to point from this slide, this is a good slide that shows how the price of crude oil in the world has trended over time, and the price of the dollar to the trend of the US dollar to the Kenya shilling. And you can see here that because we have to buy foreign exchange to buy this oil, there are two things that affect it. So the price of crude affects what we're spending on mobility, and also the interest rate, the exchange rate. So here we had a huge drop in petroleum globally, but we didn't get the full benefit of that because our exchange rate, actually kind of the shilling fell to the dollar. And so that just shows you how the problem that's stacked against us when it comes to mobility in Kenya. Next slide, please. Now, keep in mind all that fuel that we're spending money on. And this slide is trying to show that essentially Africa is rich in renewable energy potential. The take home for me from this slide is that 12% of our potential today for Africa can meet our business as usual energy demands for 2040. So if we just tap into 15% of our potential today, we are home dry. So we're importing all this energy, paying so much money for it in buying foreign exchange. And so for me, there's a huge sort of sink there of our resources. Next slide. And sort of to drive the nail in the coffin is because we're not exploring the full potential of our renewable energy, we're lacking out on jobs in the renewable energy space. This slide for me, what always sticks out is that in 2015, there were 8.1 million jobs globally working on renewable energy. And in Africa, there were about 61,000, which is about 1%. And so Africa, being super rich in renewable energy resources, at that time was only contributing 1% of the jobs in renewable energy. So that is jarring when we talk about we want to grow our economies and we have huge sort of aspirations of how to do it. Next slide. Now, why we in development partners are, why we're really focused. I've given you the economic reason why electric mobility is really appealing. But here, this slide is talking about emissions, and in this case, CO2 emissions, and for Kenya, that is. And the two things that stick out is that transport is the largest contributor of any sector to emissions in Kenya, and Martin pointed to that. And it's also the fastest growing. So, linking back to what Herman said, there's bigger potential for meeting our climate mitigation potential by reducing our emissions from transport. And there's also economic, obviously, benefits too. So I wanted to set that context. Next slide. So we're going to see a lot more vehicles on the road in developing countries, and we're going to get way more vehicles than we already have today. Just improving the efficiency alone is not going to help us meet the scenarios for climate change mitigation. And so when you look at the international energy data, it's clear that there needs to be a disruption. So, a minimum of at least 20% of all on-road vehicles need to be electric by 2030, which when I started making this slide, meaning I don't know how many years ago, 2030 seemed like a long time ago. Now, I mean, a long time to come. Now it's 10 years. And so a major disruption is needed, and it's needed like yesterday. So essentially, this is why we're here. Next slide. So with the context set, maybe just to summarize, it's clear that electromobility is a strategic and cross-cutting intervention for Kenya to help its development goals. It's going to improve our air quality, reduce our climate emissions. It links well with renewable energy, as has been said by the talks before. And of course, there's a huge economic potential to harness, be it from improving our balance of trade, from buying less oil and using our own locally produced power. We're going to create, we have a potential to create manufacturing jobs and actually have local products supplied that manufacturing. There's linkages to our growing ICT sector, and and if you look at improvements to the border sector, there's a huge potential for improving the informal sector livelihoods. And so we've seen that one of the big opportunities is for electromobility is to look at electrifying our borders as a stepping stone to electric mobility. And the next slides will touch a bit on what on that. Next slide, please. So Martin shared some data on the motorization. This data here was from a study we conducted together with the Energy, Petroleum and Research Regulatory Authority, together with the University of Nairobi and Sustainable Transport Africa. This was funded by the German Ministry of Environment through the ICI. We saw that the Kenya's 2- and 3-wheeler fleets are going faster than light-duty vehicles. Next slide. And this is on the back of what is typically a very harsh financing sort of environment for the border sectors, at least, because most of these motorcycles are borders, upwards of 95%. And so we see that there's also a financing gap, or should I say that there's an opportunity to improve the financing background, the landscape, I should say, because the amount of money that because of the default risk and things like that banks are seeing, there's an opportunity to improve this. Next slide. So one of the things we've also seen in our studies is that motorcycles are, historically known to be more polluting than cars, a lot more particulate matter, a lot more NOx, a lot more CO2 emissions and hydrocarbons because of incomplete combustion. And one of the big reasons for this is there's been a lot of push to improve emissions from vehicles, but not so much on our motorcycles. We still have carburetors on our motorcycles, and we don't have catalytic converters as we do have in cars. So the emissions are, pollutant emissions are a lot worse. But in the next slide, please. Based on the study that we saw, because our motorcycles and 2- and 3-wheelers, I should say, are increasing more than cars, we're actually seeing now for new registrations, CO2 now is mostly coming from motorcycles and not cars, based on on some of the assessments that were done. And so it shows that even for climate, for new registrations, electrifying this fleet will actually have a climate impact. Next slide. So what is the government of Kenya doing together with development partners? The first thing, and this Martin touched on, or actually delved into, I should say, Kenya has been very aggressive in investing in renewable energy. Upwards of 82% of last year were from renewables, and also grid expansion. At the end of 2019, I think almost 80% access of grid. So this means that from a power perspective, we have green power from grid, and that a lot more people are connected to the grid. So that's one big thing the government has done. Next, please. The other thing is financing. Kenya has launched a very innovative program to help bridge the green financing gap. Now, this green bonds program is across different sectors, and transport is one of them. And if you read the study that was funded by WWF on transport financing, they're looking at approximately 30 to 40 million or issuing bonds for up to 30 to 40 million for electric mobility infrastructure, working with SMEs, and that's upwards of 4 billion shillings that could be raised from this green bond to help finance electric mobility in Kenya. So that's some exciting thing the government has done. Next slide. Now, government doesn't get enough credit. There's been a lot that's been going on to improve transport. Just rush through this. We now have cleaner fuels. We have 50 low sulfur diesel. We have unleaded petrol. This is work that the Partnership for Clean Fuels and Vehicles has worked on together with UNEP and a lot of other partners. Nairobi County now has a non-motorized transport policy to put into place infrastructure for NMT to improve safety. And to also safeguard that key mode of transport, which is non-motorized. Partners are working on sustainable urban mobility plans in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nairobi. Martin mentioned bus rapid transit corridors, and I was excited to hear that actually one has been sort of funded, and that's great news. This has taken a long time. And now also work that we've been working on, there's now there's plans to put into place a Euro 4 equivalent vehicle emission standards for Kenya. But specific to electric mobility, and this has also been mentioned, thanks to a lot of work from the Tracks project for GIZ, electric mobility is now part of the country's nationally determined contributions and also the integrated national transport policy. Again, ourselves and GIZ and a bunch of others work together on helping KEBS come up with electric vehicle standards so people can import electric vehicles. Working also with EPRA and the Finance Committee of National Assembly. Excise duty was halved for electric vehicles, and we're still pushing for more, but it's a good start. And as part of ongoing, as I said, we're still working on a lot more fiscal incentives for electric vehicles. I've just had conversations with Treasury this week on trying to roll back benefits for renewable energy as well as electric mobility and bring them back into next year's budget. We've been talking about these pilots that we're going to launch with Kisumu County, Karura Forest, and Kenya Power. And actually, this week, Monday, we've been in touch with the supplier of the motorcycles. They've been finally finished assembled, so we're expecting to have them shipped anytime in the next couple of weeks. When we get out, we're trying to do the paperwork now for pre-shipment, so that we can be able to get the bike shipped and launch these pilots. Other partners, Siemens Foundation, Shell Foundation, they're supporting SMEs all across the country. And so for me, there's a lot that's going on. Next slide, please. Perhaps the most important part for me for this talk is the private sector. I think the private sector has had a huge growth. I think it's commendable. There's a lot of entities working on electric mobility. Maybe I'll just zip through this. From the top, we have OPBus, who are doing conversions of internal combustion engines to electric. We have Fika Mobility, which is looking to roll out electric motorcycles. Most of you may have heard of Nopia Ride, which is I think Africa's first electric taxi ride hailing service with an app. With cabs in different malls. We have Eco Border, which is looking to electrify border borders, and I believe they'll be launching, I think, in October with border borders in Kibera. Driver Electric, which is affiliated with Knights Energy. I think, Herman, you said it. This is probably the pioneer of electric mobility in the private sector. Maybe, let me not say that, but one of the first. They have fleets that they're leasing out for electric mobility. They help people convert their fleets. They install charging stations. Solar E-Cycles, fantastic outfit that's been working together with Sustainable Energy Research Center in Strathmore. They have manufactured light electric vehicles locally for vendors. We have Kwoba Motorcycles, who do manufacture internal combustion engine motorcycles, but they are working on a prototype for an electric motorcycle. There's two big manufacturers, Mobius, actually big compared to everyone else there, Mobius and Nissan, who are big champions for electric mobility, Nissan East Africa. And so those have also been championing electric mobility. We have Rev Electric, which is also been talking to different counties on having electric border borders within their fleets, as well as Kiri. Kiri is also a small startup that's looking at having electric scooters. Dave Tuk Tuk has been selling electric tuk-tuks out of Thika for a while now, at least 2-3 years, and so that's there's a lot of traction in there. We have Power Hive, which is funded by Toyota Tsusho, and they have they probably have the biggest fleet of electric motorcycles out in Kisii that they've been working with for a while now. We've been, of course, working with Twende. Twende is a ride-hailing app that's been looking to help border borders also improve their efficiency and look at even moving to electric mobility. We2, which is an enterprise that was formed by, or was funded, I guess, by Siemens Foundation, but is now operating in Western Kenya. They have electric cargo bikes, and there'll be a talk on that in this series later. Autotrack has manufactured Kenya's first locally made manufactured tuk-tuks together with NYS. Sorry, please go back one slide, please. There's two things I need to mention real quick. There's Meta, which is importing sort of light trucks for manufacturing. And then we have in the picture there, this is probably the most endearing story for me. That's Dishon Monene, who is a vendor from Gikomba Market, a used clothes market, who just out of his own volition went to China, saw electric scooters, and he's been importing them all on his own, no help from anyone, and selling them. And so that's an example of really now small enterprise that's already been working electric mobility in Kenya for a while. So there's a lot of stories. This is not exhaustive. These are just, off the top of the people that I know. And I'll stop there for now, but thanks to all our partners for funding all this beautiful work and for supporting this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Really, really great insights you've given us today in this meeting. So what I want to do is now dive into the questions section. Quite a lot of diverse and really, really interesting questions coming up. But first of all, I think if we can get Mr. Eshiwani to also turn on his video and microphone. Quite a lot of questions directed to you, Mr. Eshiwani, from the government side. While Mr. Eshiwani is doing that, David, there is a very specific question directed to you here. Motorcycles or electric bicycles in Karura? Can you clarify that? Very specific. I think it's with regards to the plans you're having with your pilots. Yeah.
Sure. We do have plans to have working with the Karura Forest Association and through them Kenya Forest Service to have a few motorcycles, not for rent but for the staff, the rangers who work in the forest for patrols and who drive through the forest. If you frequent Karura Forest, there's a few motorcycles that they have on staff for their crossing through the forest. So we want to have those electrified to reduce emissions. And actually, one of the things we had is that in instances they do actually come across some sort of poaching of firewood, if you will. And so if they have electric motorcycles, they'll be able to sneak up on these perpetrators. But that's a pilot that's coming up.
Oh, thank you very much, David. There's also a lot of questions around the standards. A lot of people are interested in accessing the standards. My colleague Carol will copy paste the link where you can get the standards, but primarily you can access them from the Kenya Bureau of Standards. They are pretty much the hosts and of the entity that developed the standards together with other agencies. So if you want to access them, you might have to pay for them. But my colleague Carol will be sharing the link to where you can get them. Also, with regards to the same issue, we as GIZ, we are carrying out a study in the next, by the end of the month, we will have a bit of analysis on essentially what the standards mean to us and what, where can they be applied in the country. So this is going to be a very small summary highlighting what exactly these standards mean for us and how we can move forward with them. So this one will be publicly available document. So this one we can share with you openly. But as far as accessing the standard is concerned, you have to go to the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and you might have to pay for them depending on which ones you primarily are interested in. Mr. Eshiwani, can you hear us? We would like to address a few questions that have been directed to you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So the first thing I will ask is, there's interest to know if there is any interest, any plans for more incentives apart from the reduction of excise duty. Is there anything else that the government is looking at to improve electric mobility in the country? And then while you answer that as well, also, is there any discussions around charging infrastructure? And then also, people are wondering, how do they register their vehicles at the moment, or their electric bicycles, especially? This came from Kim from Kwoba. What guidance do you have on that? You can answer that, and then we can move on to others. Thank
you. We are actually the National Treasury on areas we think that it is still possible to give more incentives other than what has been given. We are yet to get a final feedback on the same, but we are hoping for the best, and we are still pushing, hoping that eventually we shall be able to incentives in addition.
We are losing you.
Oh. Confirm you are getting me now?
Yes, yes, please, if you can repeat the last bit you mentioned.
Yeah, I had said that we have proposed a number of areas where it is possible to take action, to have incentives. These proposals have been handed over to the National Treasury. We are therefore waiting for the feedback from them on that particular matter. Once it is, once the decision is made, we shall be able to share with the public.
Okay.
Now, with regard to charging infrastructure, this one we hope that it will be specifically private sector driven, but incentives of EV parts and charging infrastructure is part of what we have already requested and waiting for a decision to be made on the same. Then thirdly, you asked about the issue of registration. Currently, NTSA registers motor vehicles and there is a place they indicate type of power or source of energy, which is they indicate whether it is fuel, petrol, or they indicate petrol, diesel, or electric. So, but we are working closely with them to see how the same can be improved and include more characteristics of EVs than just what they have at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eshiwani. Before also I go to David, there is another issue that is coming up as well with regards to the Mechanical and Transport Division in the State Department of Infrastructure. They work on specifications for procurement. There's a proposal on whether there is any engagement with them at the moment. Mr. Eshiwani.
Not really at the moment. We have not had detailed discussion on that, but that is one area we can cooperate and have more discussion. You will recall that we were planning to have a session with the key stakeholders in government that are involved in either registration, assessing duty, or any other person or any institution which is involved in processing information on EVs. So when we eventually have a session, I think we can include them and any other stakeholder that may have a role.
All right, thank you very much. David, there is a lot of issues coming up, particularly around outboard engines and applications for that. Do you have any insights on the same? I could quickly read one question.
So I can't see the questions. Do you mind reading them, or I could actually just talk a bit about what I know about outboard? But do you want to read?
Just hold on a little bit. Losing it, but there is emphasis that they're quite. Hi, David. As you engage the government, please remember Asobo Kenya, pioneers of electric mobility in the waters of Lake Victoria. Yeah. Overall,
I could also read the question on the outboard engines. It says, it's from Gabriel Mayo. He's saying he's wondering. There is no mention of outboard engines, and he believes that it's a huge contributor of CO2.
It is indeed. So I was trying to rush through my talk. When I talked about WE2 or WE2, they're doing two things. They are, or should I say, they're going. The enterprise is going to have electric cargo bikes, and they're also looking at an outboard electric motor for fishermen in Western Kenya. Now, they're not the only ones. I think my colleague Bart Fabian out of our regional office for Asia is got a big program going to look at motorizing because they have a lot of boat taxis in Bangkok and what have you. So this is a huge opportunity, or should I say area, for inland waterways and also for fishing communities. Actually, the outboard motors are very inefficient and tend to actually leak oil into the water bodies, and so that's actually another level of pollution. So absolutely right there. We ourselves have not worked on outboard motors, but that is a very good point that we should be able to start looking at that, or make sure that they're covered in standards and that they're covered in any incentives that are coming in, and so that we are not only looking at on land. Martin, I don't know if you would agree.
Yes, I do.
Have the government on board in real-time basis, and so we'll make sure that because I know we have a project coming up here where we're going to help KEBS to look at how to operationalize the standards and also how to actually coordinate with KRA and coordinate with Kenya Ports Authority. And so we have to make sure that when we talk about electric mobility, we're not just focusing on cars and motorcycles, that we're looking across the spectrum so that we're advancing everybody who's participating. Thank you. Thanks for the
Thank
comment.
you, David. A very specific questions to Mr. Eshiwani that was also partly addressed, but I think this is also of great interest to the public. Information about the planned BRT route between Nairobi City, Thika, Kasarani. Will it be operated with electric buses or ICE vehicles, Mr. Eshiwani? Very specific and
they will be operated by energy efficient vehicles. That means that if they are diesel powered, then the technology should be better, less emissions.
Thank
But
you.
the option of electric buses is also there.
All right, all right. So I'm also seeing a lot of questions around business models, and I would like to highlight the fact that we have planned the events to cover such issues. We have one event that is specifically focused on business models, looking at how to bring the costs of batteries down, or how would you own an EV at a very favorable costs. How far is the Kisumu Sustainable Mobility Plan? David, do you know something about it?
I believe a draft was actually launched, and there was a webinar, I want to say last week or 2 weeks ago. This was conducted by ITDP, the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, in concert, obviously, with the city of Kisumu and Kisumu County. And also, I know they've been working closely with some of my colleagues. So there is a draft. It's on their website, the SAMP for Kisumu. And I believe they're taking public comment as we speak. So I could try and share a link with Carol, and Carol, maybe you could distribute it later.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, something else also on capacity development, particularly of TVET and universities students. I will say that at the moment, as GIZ, we're also partnering with the Siemens Stiftung, looking at an assessment of the training needs for the mobility sector, electric mobility sector. So this is an ongoing exercise, and I'm glad to see that there's a lot of interest on the same. So as mentioned, also Siemens Stiftung will be making a presentation as well on their work on rural applications of electric mobility, looking at proof of concept and these sort of elements that have been raised in the question in the issues at the moment.
Herman?
Yes, please.
If I could just jump in on the part about academia, which is very important. We do also have a lot, and maybe that's something my talk missed, is there is a lot of active participation from academia. I know that the Technical University of Kenya, Strathmore University, University of Nairobi have been key researchers on this topic, and a lot more others. This is not an exhaustive list, but there is definitely a lot of engagement from academia, and so we continue to engage them and to include them in all our capacity building efforts.
Yeah, so maybe final words, Mr. Eshiwani, 30 seconds or less. We are running out of time. We can address all this most of the issues that are being raised as well are things we will address in the upcoming series of events. So maybe first final words from David, and then Mr. Eshiwani, you can have some words as well, and then we go from there. David, and then Mr. Eshiwani.
Oh, you caught me flat-footed. I guess mine is just excitement about the progress that we're making so far, and obviously really excited about the engagement from government, from private sector. I mean, everybody's participating. We just have to start getting results. We have to start getting uptake, because with the market share, we'll be able to drop prices. And so I think for me, it's a good start. There's a lot more work to be done. Looking forward to it.
Mr. Eshiwani.
Yeah, thank you, Herman. Mine, I'll be very brief. Just to say that we are fully supportive of EMOB, and We are going to address and partner with various stakeholders to see improvement of e-mobility in the entire nation. But in addition to that, I think I wish to share that we are also improving urban mobility, particularly addressing NMT infrastructure in the city of Nairobi. We are currently increasing the network of cycle lanes so that in the near future, it will be possible to cycle, for example, from Eastlands to the CBD or Westlands to CBD, do business, and a person moves out on a bike in a safe way. Because as you may know, currently the situation is a bit challenging for those people who want to cycle, in the sense that they have to share the same space. And that becomes challenging, knowing the way some of our drivers do behave. So the issue of NMT, pedestrian walkways and cycling lanes, particularly this era of COVID, we have really put it as a first priority so that once the economy resumes to normal, those ones who are held, who are working from home, they'll find a new Nairobi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eshiwani. We are very excited to know that these are at the heart of the government plans. Unfortunately, there was quite a lot of questions that came up. We could not answer all of them, but as mentioned, we have all these, just putting it up, we have several events coming up, also very specific focus. So we will be really looking forward to having you again, and happy to note that we had over 100 participants taking part in today's event, and we're really looking forward to further discussions moving on. So the next event is going to be on the 27th of August, and we will be happy to have Siemens Stiftung, excuse me, and we2, who will share on applications around rural areas and also a little bit around urban applications from Night Energy. So we are really glad that you made time to join us today, and we look forward to having you in future events. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.